Hello, hello, hello. Today we're looking at firms and production for GCSE Economics. Let's get into it. So here's a syllabus list of what we're going to go through. We're going to look at demand for factors of production, the difference between labour and capital intensive production, the difference between production and productivity, which is a massive problem that students have in the exam. I hope we can alleviate that today. I think we'll stop there today and do those ones later. Okay, let's get started. So, demand for factors of production. We must understand that demand is a derived demand. Do you have any idea what that means? So the first thing we must understand is labour is a derived demand, and it's derived from its decision to supply a good in the market. Basically, they're only going to want you if you provide them more value than what they're paying you. For example, I pay you $50 to work and you make me $100 worth of shoes. Bargain for me and for you. You get money, I get more money. However, if I pay you $150 and you make me $100 worth of shoes, that's a no-go for my business, right? Later on in A-level economics, we look at how these kind of equal out over time. Because let's say it's $60 for the new guy and they're still making you $100, that's a $40 gap, right? Next guy, let's say $70. They're still making you $100, so that's a $30 difference. $80, still making you $20. $90, still making you $10, and $100. That's where everything equals out, and that's where you stop. Because if you go past that, they're going to produce less value than what you're giving them. Okay, let's move on. So how about labor-intensive versus capital-intensive production? Do you have any idea about this? So labor-intensive represents organizations that have a lot of manual labor or people working in them. So there's a higher degree of labor than capital. And if you remember, capital is man-made goods used for production. Think about old-school mining. These guys don't seem to be smiling, do they? Mining's a hard life. Right, moving on. So the kind of businesses that require this then, what do you think? We've got plumbing, fishing, fruit picking, old school factories, as we're going to see in a minute. Nut factories in particular, which is very precise, and we'll explain why in a moment. What about modern factories that use high-tech machines? Look at this drone with an advanced camera on it. These are known as capital-intensive firms. They have a lot of man-made tools used for production of goods and services. All right, do you have any idea what this is? This is a cashew nut. It actually grows on a fruit, and there's only one nut, and it's right here. Pretty wild, eh, that nuts grow on trees? Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at a video of two factories, and I want you to think about the differences between these factories, the production processes, the people they employ. I want you to see which one's labour intensive, obviously, and capital intensive, and also which one do you think is becoming more popular in society and why. Let's get started.
So I remember the days when, as I said, around 800 cashew factories were working here. The whole factory have been working in full swing. So that was the golden time of the industry. I have got around 6 cashew factories now and employing nearly 2,500 workers.
So just have a think, lots of workers. So is that capital intensive or labour intensive?
Businesses nowadays are becoming very, very difficult. Now out of the 800 factories, only 100 factories are working. We adopt manual processing because manually the wastage is very less.
That's a very interesting claim, isn't it? The waste from manual labour is less. I'm curious as to whether that's actually verifiable or not.
And also the kernels are very good instead of using machines. That's what my experience is.
Khi mà tôi quyết định tăng cường để mà tự động hóa mọi khâu sản xuất, cái thứ nhất là tăng năng suất sản xuất. Cái thứ hai là tránh sản phẩm tiếp xúc với người công nhân quá nhiều để đảm bảo vệ sinh an toàn thực phẩm. Vì cái ngành của chúng tôi là ngành lương thực phẩm có mang tính xuất khẩu, và các thị trường chúng tôi xuất qua như Mỹ, Nhật, Úc, Hà Lan là những thị trường rất là khó tính.
Just look at the difference.
Vì vậy chúng tôi phải đáp ứng cái yêu cầu vệ sinh an toàn thực phẩm lên hàng đầu. Từ đó tự động hóa là một cái phương án tất yếu, ai cũng phải làm.
Trong quá trình mình làm mười mấy năm đến bây giờ thì mình đổi mới được là cái máy móc đồ này kia về hỗ trợ cho người lao động mình thêm. Thì cũng rất ngạc nhiên, tại vì một cái máy đó thì như lao động mình có thể ngày mình công nhân mình có thể là một ngày một người lao động mình bóc cả 10 kg. Thì là mình như vậy mình tính lên, nhưng mà khi cái máy người ta làm có thể là người ta làm ra được 4 tấn đến 5 tấn tùy theo cái thời gian của cái máy đó mình điều hành nó chạy. Trong cái bánh bánh màu mà nó phân ra loại nó cũng tùy theo cái hàng của mình. Trong quá trình bán nếu mà mình phân thì nó cũng được nhiều lắm. Trong cái điều của mình phân ra các loại nó nằm tới 20 mấy loại. Lao động mình chỉ có là kiểm tra lại những cái sót mà máy nó nhìn không hết. Thì mình kiểm tra trong quá trình đó là máy bánh màu đó, nên là thấy nó cũng là rất có hiệu quả, rất tốt.
In this industry, most of the business is family oriented. They don't know the technicality behind the machines.
Interesting that unions are involved here to stop the mechanization, to stop the growth of the firms.
If this is the situation, more and more factories are getting closed. Maybe the entire industry will get closed. It cannot run here because it's unviable.
I think actually it is completely viable with a change in ideology and a boost in investment. Even if a few factories have to close down for enough savings to occur to invest in advanced machinery, things can change. Okay, so the biggest difference between these production methods then, what do you think? India is still relying on manual labor to open these nuts. They don't invest in the new machinery or upgrade, so they're just using cheap labor because it still is really cheap in general over there. GDP per head is much lower than GDP in other countries. The manager claims that the quality is better. What do you guys think? However, this is absolutely not guaranteed, is it? Productivity is lower, hygiene is an issue, and workers might have like long-term issues like repetitive strain injury from doing that same manual task all day. What protections do they have over there? Let's contrast that with Vietnam. There's lots of capital investments, capital-intensive business, high productivity. Automation is clearly advantageous, as this guy was getting customers in Europe and Australia, whereas the guy in India was struggling to find customers for his products. It's a clear lesson in the growth of our times, and it is kind of sad that potentially this is being held back by Luddites in India, in the same way machinery was damaged in the UK by the Luddites because they didn't want to see machinery to spin cloth, because they feared machinery led to unemployment, which led to economic uncertainty. So it's an understandable notion, but there's also an argument that if you have a company that becomes internationally successful, sells more things abroad, it will lead to more jobs in the long run down the line, particularly in sales. So yeah, really interesting juxtaposition there. All right, let's move forward. We need to basically have a strong distinction between production and productivity, because students get this messed up all the time in the exams. So productivity. Productivity is input in relation to output. Let's say the input stays the same. Let's say I have an ice cream machine and I employ someone to use it, and they can make 100 ice creams a day from this ice cream machine. But after a few days, they become more skilled and they understand it better, and then they can produce 120 ice creams a day. This means I'm using the same inputs, one person and one machine, but I'm getting a greater output. Their productivity has increased. Now, production. This is literally the process of manufacturing. That's it, the process of manufacturing. So here's a task for you to understand this distinction a little bit better. I have 200 employees that make 45,000 pairs of shoes. I employ 2 new members of staff and the production increases by 4%. Calculate the increase in production and the change in productivity per person. So the increase in production is just going to be 45,000 times 1.04, which would be 45,000 plus 4%, right? Because our production number has increased by 4%. So this shows we've made 1,800 more pairs of shoes, okay, for these 2 extra staff. Productivity, however, we need to work out the average production per employee. To do that first, we need to divide 45,000 by 200. And that's going to give us 225 per person. So originally, each person would make 225 pairs of shoes. But we've hired new people. And if we divide the new number of shoes produced, which is 46,800, by the number of staff, which is 202 now, we get 231.6, which shows we have an average increase in production of around 6 shoes per person. Great. What a great deal. What about task 2? Same concept. Can you pause it and work it out? I hope you got these numbers. I made them a little bit more complicated just so you can guarantee that you're good at this. All right, that's it from me today. Have a great day and I'll see you again.